So as you know, this Wednesday, the 5th of May, we have a class that is really special. We have 4 students coming to class to present. Their 4 students are currently in the class. There's quite a large number of people that actually told me they would come to see other professors, other business people coming to see your presentation. And of those 4 students, this presentation are on Califia Farms. They will not be using the name Califia Farms because they're going to try to make it more personal. So they will be using their first name, as one of the students is called Arash. So it's going to be Arash Farms, Jose Farms, Martin's Farms, and Tigran is using his last name, or part of his last name, Avetis Farm. So it's going to be very exciting. This is an event that is always, I rarely use the word always because it's a word that you can't use as often as people would think you can, but I can say with this event, it's always a success. There's variation of successes, but it's always a large success. And so the students that come will understand the difficulty it is to present. Obviously, they're presenting very much on Califia Farms, so you know how it is difficult to come up with the innovation for Califia Farms. They will give their evaluation of this innovation and the reasoning and logic behind this innovation. They will try to convince everyone about these innovations. And so what I like to do right now is actually do a little ranking of those people. And
Professor,
yes, hello.
I'm sorry. I have a quick question.
Yes,
So like for the link for this presentation is gonna be the same for the class or
same.
same?
It's class time, and what you use today to come and every other session is exactly the same.
Oh, okay, thank you very much,
So
Professor.
nothing special on that.
Cool.
Thank you for asking.
Sure.
They're working very hard. It's very exciting to see them compete like this. It's not an easy exercise. You know, there's going to be probably close to 200 people, and um, people are going to come. People that came to the previous one. This is the 14th year. So I've been doing this for 14 years. This predates, this was done before Shark Tank, and it's very much the same as Shark Tank. And so they will compete for the 14th Wells Fargo Center Best Fast Pitch and Investor Pitch. It's a great exercise. It's a difficult exercise. It's very realistic. And as you know, there will be an executive from Califia Farm coming to hear them. And so everyone should be excited to hear them because you will have an insight of 4 team of what they think should be done for Califia Farm. So you will hear the obvious SWOT analysis in there. I don't think any of them, I'm pretty sure none of them will present a SWOT analysis per se because they worked very hard not to present a SWOT analysis. They are much more advanced in that sense that they will be presenting the SWOT within their presentation. So you hear about what the company is good at, what they could improve, what are the changes in the market that they can take advantage of, and how important these changes are, what are the sources and references that give them confidence of these opportunities that they could take advantage of. Maybe these opportunities will be described through storytelling, something that happened to them personally. So that was Vibu Sina, if you remember when he came for him, he told us about the importance of storytelling in addressing partners and investors. So that's what you're going to see. Then you're going to see them defend and argue because when you make a business presentation, the what you say are not as important as the why. The why are the most important. The justification, the argument is always the most important. So for that matter, what's very important is to talk about your target, but not so much the description of the target. The description of the target and the characteristics of the segments that you are creating are very important, but they're not as important as the justification. the why of the target. So you're going to want to spend a lot of time on the why, more so, because you will be, everyone in business is judged on the why. No, people do not have the right to be um, saying what's important without having a justification, unless you're a guru, unless you're a leader of a group, unless you're a government official that has all kind of power, and then you can say what you want without justifying as much. But when you're looking for investors, you have to justify. Um, the next thing is they will be talking about specifically the product and why is the product the way they think it should be. Then they will talk about how to sell this product. So these people presenting will have more details on the the 4 Ps than you have probably inside your own group report. It's not required in your group report to have as many details as they will have, but you hearing their details should inspire you in building your own set of details that you may want to put inside the proposal, which is very much at the end. If you look at the end of the proposal, there's a discussion and the recommendation of what they should do in terms of the 4 Ps. So that's at the end. That should help you as well. Then they will talk about other things that are very important when you're talking to an investor, which is, what are the projections, what are the expenses, what are the objectives in terms of sales, the potential profits that can be made. They will talk about the market, the size of the market. So this is called the TAM, SAM, SUM, which is the evaluation of the potential group of people that you will be able to sell at the beginning. And since you talk about the people you sell at the beginning, you have to talk about the people you will be selling through the process of diffusing the product. So not only they talk about the first target and the innovators, but they will talk about the earlier majority and the rest of the diffusion groups that will be getting this product. So all the things that are very realistic, very important in business. If you are in a business school because you didn't know what else to study, you may find this somewhat interesting. If you are in a business school because you're fascinated with business, you want to grow as a business person, this is a presentation that you do not want to miss. To make sure and that you are motivated to come, I've made an announcement that I will give 3%, the leftover 3% of the 5% attendance for coming to class on Wednesday from 2 to 3:15. Obviously, the students are part of a team. I'm hoping that their own team are going to be the best cheerleader for them. That is very important. And they will probably learn a lot. And I would imagine that it's going to tremendously help with their own group projects for these people individually to work so hard to participate in this. So congratulations in advance for the students. I mentioned to almost all of you that you can contact me. So Tigran, Martin, Arash, and Rosé, you can contact me between now and 2 p.m. on Wednesday. Anytime, I will try to respond as quickly as possible to keep preparing you for this event. So moving on, I want to jump into distribution, which I've left off in last Wednesday, where I was showing you these examples of family that are going on vacation, having a fun time. And I was asking you what happened 5 minutes after this photo was taken. Well, not everybody was as happy as it seems that they were originally. The situation became bad because people started losing things on their way. Skis is an entrepreneur that uh, was created by an entrepreneur that was thinking about this problem and offer a solution through an innovative product. Having the best innovation, having the best product does not warranty you to be successful. To be successful in business, and I say this with a lot of personal experience, is one of the most important P is the P of distribution, which is commonly referred as place. Could the product be the most important? It sounds like it could be, but essentially you could sell just about anything if you have the right distribution. If you have a great product and the right distribution, then you will be very, very successful. So in their situation, what they did is they pitched their product to the sharks on the program Shark Tank, and they found some resonance and interest from Barbara Corcoran, who eventually spent what you could say a very small amount of money, 50,000, to help them The 50,000 is not going to help them. What's going to help them and what helped them the most was not the investment, was not even the 15% that she took in Ski Z, which personally I think is a too small percentage. You would have wanted her to take a bigger percentage because percentage of ownership is a big incentive for these people to spend time. 15%, they spend an hour a month. 50%, maybe they spend 4 hours a month, and it's 4 times more for a much more a smaller percent than 4 times 15. So it's very important to get these people involved because what they do is they put you in touch and they put you inside the network of the people that they know. Who you know in business is tremendous, and you have to never underestimate that. Distribution is therefore getting your product in the hands of the consumers, and getting into their hands is very much helped by who these people know. Here's another example of a product that went to Shark Tank. It's called the Original Comfy, which is essentially just a very soft and comfy sweater that makes people feel like they are warm and comfy and cuddly and wanting to just watch uh, TV or do nothing. And so this product, you can imagine why someone created that based on a personal interest, right? And so they created this product, but again, they couldn't sell it. They couldn't sell it because it requires more than just a good price, more than a good product. It also requires knowing the people that are going to be able to bring it to the consumers. There's the producer and there's the consumer, and there's a huge black space between these two, and nobody sees in this black space. And so the distributors are the people that create the light and the tunnel and the highway and the freeway between all of these people. So you want to get that connection. So she, again, was able to create connection with Bath and Beyond, QVC, and the supermarket targets, which speed up the process of selling tremendously. Oh, yes. I see Jack Graham. You have a question, so go ahead.
Just a quick statement. I used to work at a Bed Bath and Beyond, and I always had to prioritize stocking and presenting that actual product, like for most of my shift. When they had like just it was interesting. It was their partnership with that company was really prioritized, and the way they marketed and presented it to customers.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. That's very important. Yeah. So it was prioritized because of the relationship that she had. And so it makes a big difference because suddenly she says, I want X, and X happened. Those two, I believe, brothers could never get this amount of attention from those distributors and from you, right? Because they were not as powerful. And so they can do that. And you can't think of them as being wealthy people can do that. It's not a question just of wealth, it's a question of network, having the network and the relationship. So there is a cost in transferring products from manufacturers to the consumers. And this transfer of cost is what the distributor do. In the case of Barbara Corcoran, it's not a distributor issue that she was playing. She was playing the role of what's called a broker. So I'll define a little bit more what a broker later on, but brokers are part of the distribution. They are just another intermediary. So what are distributions? Distribution are a set of interdependent organizations. So there's multiple people in that black space that are intermediaries where they depend one from one another, and they involve in the process of making sure that the product is available to the final consumers or to the business users that are going to use again this product to sell it to someone else. The function of a distribution channel, so the function that the distributor do is that they collect information from the market that they can pass on to you. They also give information to the market. They can give information to the act of promoting the product. They are a point of contact because, if you're thinking a manufacturer is usually not equipped to be contacted by thousands of consumers versus a distributor may have this capacity to respond because they have people in stores, for example. They do the matching, which means that they know which store, which network is more appropriate in order to sell a product. They will do the negotiation of your prices, of their prices. They will do the physical logistics of moving the products. They will be buying or making deposits on some of the products that you're selling to them. They may be therefore paying before they receive, so they're financing it. They're removing some of the risks. I mean, not fully, they're sharing the risk. You make a product, you take the risk of making this product, they take the risk of carrying this product, and then sometimes they have some buy-out agreement, which is that if they don't sell it, you have to get it back and you have to refund them. I know, for example, Canada has some agreements like that when I get to sell them cognac, where if they don't sell the cognac, I have to buy it back from them. And so you have to agree with this early on. And so they share some of the risk. And sometimes they can lower the amount of risk. So there's essentially multiple methods of distributing, but the two big ones is either direct from the producer to the consumer, or indirect from the producer with a number of intermediaries to the consumer. And the minimum number of intermediaries is that you are selling it through the retailer to your consumers. The other one, which is more traditional, is that you have a wholesaler who is before the retailer, and it would be the first group of intermediary that will also work on the matching. So you sell it, you have to match producer and wholesalers, and then the wholesalers will match the retailers to the type of consumers. So this is important because it's a function to know which market is the most appropriate. And the more your product is specialized, the more you have to use intermediaries. Intermediaries are not as required for markets which are less specialized. So commodities may not need as many intermediaries, and luxury products, expensive products, may need more intermediaries. You have two distribution strategies, which are called push and pull. These are distribution strategies, so place strategies, but they are also promotion, so communication strategies. So some are just one, this one happens to be push and pull, are therefore either the producer that initiates incentive through the distribution network, which means that they give stimulus to the wholesaler, or they give a stimulus to the retailer in order to sell their products. Usually the stimulus is extra product or cheaper product or some commission or some financial incentives in order to be selling the product. Pull is when the incentive is to the consumers. A consumer incentive is if the consumer buys more, the consumer saves. Pull is also giving communication and information and building a relationship directly to the consumer. So traditionally, building a relationship directly with the consumer is tedious, very specialized, and extremely expensive, and only the big company could do that. Now, because of social media, this function of building a relationship with the consumers is more affordable, even though it's becoming less affordable because it has become a real business role and even a business function to do social media. So social media is not less and less something that is done by the company, but it's done by some kind of external organization in order to manage the social media for companies, because it becomes so specialized. Just one element of that is the dissemination of influencers. Before, there were some huge influencers, such as celebrities, that were used in order to influence people to buy products. Now they're called micro influencers. So they are influencers that are not as famous, but they have some level of fame that can be monetized. So they may have just 500,000 of followers, but they don't cost you as much as people that have millions of followers. So you have the choices to go for people that have multi-million followers, people that have multi-hundreds of thousands of followers, and then people that are influencers for thousands of followers. The thousands of followers will cost you dollars to to use and to get on your side, versus the people that have hundreds of thousands will cost you thousand, and the people that have million will cost you hundreds of thousands. So depending on your budget, you may try to diversify this, or you may try to focus just on the big one. But now the trend is to actually use more thousands of micro influencers versus using one or two huge influencers. That has been the trend going on in terms of pool social media strategy. So the best case scenario is when you use both, when you have a push, which is through the network, the distribution network, giving incentives, and pull directly to the customers. Having both at the same time amplify the result of these two strategies. Other distribution strategies are intensive, selective, and exclusive distribution. So intensive distribution is when you decide to sell your product everywhere. So it's a product that is not so differentiated. It's a product that is applicable to everyone. It's not very specific to a target. It can be mass produced. It's not very sophisticated, so you decide to go everywhere. Selective distribution is when your product is sophisticated, it's higher in price, it's not consumed all the time, and therefore this shopping products, if you're using analogy with the different type of products that you have, will be more selective, which is it's not everywhere, it's in selective places. And then exclusive, it's very much these products that are limited products, where there will be specialty products only sold in certain areas by certain distributor, and there's some contractual obligation and objectives to keep this exclusivity for the area. And so if you're selling chewing gum, auto parts, it's intensive. If you're selling cars, it will be a specific dealership. Depending on the car that you're selling, maybe become more of an exclusive dealership. Do you have any questions? So distribution is a world of domination. The idea behind this is that you want to understand that there is the sort of a battle between manufacturers. Manufacturers have the best products, manufacturers that have the most products. So it's not just good products, but they produce in masses. So there's lots of products that are able to be sold, and therefore there's a likelihood of getting a large profit from all of these products. And there's lots of inventory and all that. Then there's domination also from the costs. So you are the manufacturer, you have this cost domination. But when you're a distributor, it's very much the distributors have this opportunity that they have this relationship with the customers. Customers buy the cheapest product, customers buy the best product, customers buy the most convenient product. So that's why Amazon became so successful, is because they try to dominate distribution, and therefore people are not buying brands anymore. They are buying what Amazon is selling, and so therefore people are not realizing that their choices are becoming not as big as before, because before they were thinking in terms of brands. Now they think in terms of what Amazon sells is what I buy, and so they are being not realizing sort of dominated by one store where they buy everything. So there's a little video that I want to show you. Just a second, let me put it on. It's funny that Steve Jobs used this analogy of fruit, and he used bananas and peaches. Would have been convenient if he said you've worked in apples, but he didn't. So that would have been funny as well. So this idea is that you have to walk the walk. Is very, very important. And so the concept of bargaining power is something that it's hard to teach. You have to experience it. When you are a manufacturer, you have some advantages and disadvantages when you are a distributor, you have some advantages and disadvantages. The bargaining power of a manufacturer is they control the quality of the product, and they can be very sure of the quality of these products. You control the reputation and the brand equity of your brand that you're selling. You also contribute to the profit and of the distributor that you sell the product. So, for example, you could be a manufacturer that has a high profit margin that gives the opportunity of a high profit margin for the distributor. So you could say, you know, I make almond milk, and when Albertson sells my almond milk, they can make 50% versus my competitors' almond milk, they can only make 30%. So it's 20% more with my brand. Distributors like that, and that's a bargaining power that you have, where you have the more markup for the distributors. You also have your consumer loyalty, and again, it goes back to this reputation and the fact that your brand is powerful. And so the bargaining power of a manufacturer is, if you sell a product, who cares? This who cares, when you're looking at the push and pull strategy, is very much the pull power that you have when people are seeking your brand and they care for your brand and they go, where is the brand, and where it is, I'm going to look for it. So the internet has made it very interesting, is because you can have the potential of having a low bargaining power, where distributors don't um, seek to distribute your brand because they don't see as much pull strategy coming from you. But eventually you develop this relationship with the consumer, and then the consumer look for your product and they find it from direct availability from online stores, and and then you don't have to rely so much on the physical stores. And because of this, you are able to bargain better with the physical stores to carry your products, which they were not going to bargain originally because they didn't care so much for your product. So that is very, very important. And all of this is a little bit like learning to box, doing shadow boxing, looking at your shadow or looking at yourself in a mirror versus actually boxing for real against someone. It's a totally different ball game. Experience come with practice when it comes to distribution. Distributor bargaining power, we see, is where they're located. So if it's physical, is on the internet. I mean, if you are on the top 5 of Google, you have a very good chance to be selected. The location, as a physical location, everyone knows that this is very important. A space where lots of traffic, a space which has parking, a space where it's easy to access and is in the middle of where everybody is. That's going to help you a lot. The sales volume of a distributor is very, very important as well. And that's how they bargain and negotiate with manufacturers, by saying, you know, I sell one a day, or I sell 10,000 a day. That gave them much more credibility and much more power of negotiating better prices. Because they sell so much, they also have the power to buy more. And when they buy more, they can create quite a large share of purchasing from the manufacturers. Remember, most clients of manufacturers are intermediaries. If the direct sales is growing, it's still the B2B, the biggest market share. So you have to deal with this distributor, and you have to develop a good relationship with this distributor. And distributors have the same situation, which are called consumer loyalty. They have their own brand equity through the relationship that they have with their customers. So organizations have to organize themselves, taking all of this into consideration, and they can have different agreements. Either they try to control everything, being the manufacturer, and then eventually developing some wholesaling processes, and eventually gaining some traction into retailing, and maybe, you know, online retailing. So they can do everything, or they can deal with the different layers of intermediaries, and then negotiate with each one of them on a timely basis within a year, or on a volume basis within thousands of purchases that they need to be made. And so wholesalers can get organized into a franchise, but retailers also can be organized into a franchise. And so everyone is trying to be united in order to have a bigger marketing power, a bigger bargaining power, in order to negotiate. So the retailer to negotiate better with the wholesalers to negotiate better with the retailer on the manufacturers. Everyone is trying to be bigger. And a simple example is Home Depot is very successful because they're such a large organization, and not only the retailing, but they're so large that they can also play the game of being a wholesaler. And so if you are Ace Hardware and you are like this independent store, there's no way you can buy the products at the cost that Home Depot is buying it. And therefore, you have to unite between all of these retailers to create your own chain of purchasing in order to be able to, through the power of this union, be buying as many products as possible. So what are the conflicts? You have the horizontal conflict, which occurs among the firms at the same level of the channel, so retailers to retailers. That is a problem, and that's why you have to think about your distribution being intensive, selective, and exclusive, and how you're going to deal with this, what kind of agreements you're going to have. If you're selling to retailers that are well organized and united, they're going to be buying large amounts and then playing some role of wholesalers, and then retailers, they're going to have better prices and they're going to be in areas competing with other retailers that don't have the same buying power. Who is your target? What do they want of the product? What kind of type of product is it? Is it a specialty product? Is it a shopping product? And therefore, you have to think about these conflicts and be careful that there's no conflict between retailers. I deal with conflict between retailers all the time, and the most common thing has to do with the pricing. So obviously, I don't sell the same price to someone that buys one product or 10 products or 1,000 products. And once I sell them a product that they buy in thousand, they get such a discount, then their markup afterwards is going to be impactful on their prices as a retailer compared to other retailers that are buying in smaller numbers. So there's a discrepancy. And this discrepancy in the market is creating some conflict. And eventually you have to decide, am I going to sell to large corporations? And these large corporations are going to be selling it to people that are looking for a price more than the specific quality of a product? Or do I sell to more individual, independent stores where consumers are looking for a specific quality? So vertical conflict is when you have conflict not with the same type of intermediary, but with different intermediaries. And vertical conflict are oftentimes you have less of them in terms of numbers that happen every year. But when there is conflict, it's oftentimes more damaging. So I have conflict between stores, online stores, between um, a store in New York that is selling online, which most of the time is going to be distributed in the north east of the USA, but they can have a price of 100 versus my Los Angeles store will have a price of 150. So there will be a 50% differential of prices. Therefore, it's not very competitive, and it shows my brand either being too low or too high on one side. And so oftentimes these people will talk about the fact that they don't want to carry the brand because one is too low on one side and too high on the other. And they're going to ask me to look at that. Oftentimes it may have to do with where they imported. So if the person that was in Los Angeles imported from the importer being in New York, it's normal that the Los Angeles product be more expensive than the New York product. And they may change the next time where the importation was in Los Angeles, and therefore suddenly New York product will cost them more to buy and to get there. So then you have to decide, should I have different importers in order to mitigate and balance that? So then you have importation on the East Coast, on the West Coast, in order to avoid having too much differential prices between the two sides of a huge country like the United States. But then when you have different importers in different places, it's sort of dangerous because if your importer has an argument with the retailer, oftentimes that relationship may be damaged, and the damage may not be just one store that you lose, but it may be the entire importer. So the entire region is lost. So vertical conflict happen less because there's less people involved, but potentially, but then it's when there's an issue, it creates a larger volume of products issue than the horizontal conflict are not as large in terms of the size of the impact it has, but much more common. So you can't say there's one better than the other. They've gotten both occur, and it's a different way of dealing with them. And the way you deal with them is you look at the cost benefit essentially. You look at the long term relationship that you want to build, and you want to also think about the terms, the time it's going to take you to fix these if you don't fix them as early as possible. There may be a seasonality of your sales, there may be a, a month or a season that you sort of lost and that you can never get again because you have to wait for the next season. So it's much more damaging oftentimes than one may think.
Yeah, I do. When you're like, let's say Califia Farms, they have a distributor like US Foods, or they have their online store. Um, is that a conflict altogether? Because if you're selling on an online store and let's say the online store is successful, it's keeping people away from going to Whole Foods and purchasing Califia Farms at the store.
Yes.
Or is it best to have all these different options to try to gain market share?
So it's to explain this, it's this slide, the bargaining power, and then this slide is trying to do a innovate in your distribution. The idea is when you're a manufacturer, you try to lower the bargaining power, so the strengths, the forces that distributor have. So you sort of want to have some distribution yourself, direct distribution. When you're a distributor, what you want to do is eventually grow your relationship with the customer and if eventually introduce some products under your distribution name. So it's going to be called Signature Select. It's not called Ketchup Heinz anymore. It's not called Johnson & Johnson shampoo. It's not called Colgate toothpaste, but it's called Signature Select by Albertson. So you can buy the Signature Select toothpaste, shampoo, olive oil, and all that, right? And so distributors are going to try to make their own brands, make their own products to gain from the relationship they have with the customers. So when they do that, they compete against the manufacturers. And in a way, they should not do that because that shows that they are two-faced people. But they have to do that because they have to increase their bargaining power. When the manufacturer are deciding to also go direct, is they doing it in order to have a better bargaining power with distributors because the last thing you want is you don't want a distributor to go, you know what, if I don't sell your product, who's going to buy it? You need me. You don't want to be in a need position, so you have to develop this. Just in case, a little bit like I've told a number of students when we had meetings in my office about the fact that Califia Farms doesn't have farms, doesn't have land. I think the fact that they don't have land is an issue in the long run because they have some level of dependence with farmers. The question is, how much percentage should they have? I think 0% is not good in your bargaining power. I think maybe 15% is not going to make them able to be independent, but it gives them the potential that if they lose some of their farmers, they have enough that they produce themselves that they can sort of get a reduction but increase the production on their side. It's a little bit of a safety valve. I think you need to have a safety valve. I think you need to have an in-pound, a buffer. And so manufacturers, your buffer is you need to develop some sales, direct sales through a catalog, the email, the internet, social media, application, mobile marketing is you want to because it's in your advantage. Could this that be always 5% of your sales and you never really excel, but you have it? So you have it? Yes, you should. It's just kosher to do that. Did I answer your question?
Yes, but on the sales side, so that the distributor doesn't have so much bargaining power.
Yes.
If you have such a good product that the customer demands it, what about reps that go to a hotel, restaurant, large food chain, grocery store, and sells the product? It's a great product. It's the best product out there. This is why it creates the demand, takes the power out of the distributor's hand.
Well, exactly. So one what you're saying is what most people think, that great quality of product reduces the bargaining power of distributors because you have product leadership. And it's true that it does help. The only thing is it does not help as much as common sense would dictate that it helps. Most normal people, common sense would say if you have a great product, you will succeed. My experience, and that's why I had this video of Steve Jobs, is that in practice, it's not that way. In theory, best products win. In practice, best distribution wins. Best distribution from the manufacturer developing a distribution process where they are doing it by themselves very well. Example, traditional example for the past 30 years is Dell back in the days, or through a network of distributors who you have a great relationships. Distribution trumps all other things in business. So if you have a really good product and great distribution, it's very, very likely that you will succeed. If you have a horrible product and great distribution, it's very likely that you won't work very well. If you have an okay product and a great distribution, it is very possible that you will succeed better than a fantastic product with an okay distribution. Distribution, for the most part, 90% of the time, so I leave 10% for some other occasions, is what makes you successful in business, is having people eyeballs. More important than having great distribution is or great product is having consumers believe that your product is great. I mean, you have a great product and you have a product that is not so great, but that consumers think is great is more important than the great product. You cannot, the measurement of what's great is very subjective. The evaluation done by an expert will be very different than the consumer. At the end of the day, the best evaluation of the greatness of a product is not the one that comes from an expert, is the one that comes from a consumer. And the consumer evaluation is not as objective, is not as true, correct if you want, but it's the most correct in terms of you being successful, which is the one that distributor follow. Distributor do not follow, for the most part, 90%, maybe this time 95%. Distributors are not brave for the most part, 98%. Distributors are risk averse for the most part, 99%. They sell what's easy to sell. They like to sell what's easy and they like to sell what makes the biggest markup. So if a product is really good, they take this as a proxy, as an evidence that consumers are going to want it. The more savvy and experienced distributors are, for the most part, is they don't equate a great quality product with a for sure likelihood of success. What they see that a product will work very well is a product that has a high margin for them, and they hope a high margin for the manufacturer, so that way the manufacturer create incentives, financial incentives in order to sell the product. Financial incentive to sell the product will go into helping salespeople do their job, which is push the product, will help the company have promotions and events. That's how you get influencer to essentially lie. For the most part, influencers don't know about the product. For the most part, influencers are people that wear the hat of being an influencer and they have the courage to say that they are influencers, and they spend the time and the stamina and they have confidence. They have maybe a large ego to pursue the fact that they're going to eventually, day after day, look like they know more than other people, and other people are going to take their words as the gospel of the words. So someone has to do that, take this leadership position and gain from people sort of weak capacity of judging objectively things. So people are using their emotions, they jumping to conclusion, and therefore the best products are oftentimes the one that are ignored because the best products oftentimes require more money to be put on the content, on the objective content of the product, and less money on the subjective content of the product, which are the ones that are more perceived by customers. And I used this example one time, maybe 2 weeks ago, when I was telling you that if you were Paris Hilton and you point fingers on any product, these products will be successful. There's another personage that has been very successful, individual, is Oprah Winfrey. If Oprah Winfrey says this is a good book, it's often that this book will be perceived as good by everybody and people will buy it. The reality is how much objectiveness, expertise as Oprah in saying if a book is good or bad. I mean, has she been, how much theory and understanding on the quality of a book? Has she been trained in order to evaluate books and all of this? Probably not. So her perception is just Oprah's perception, which may have worked a number of times and many times it may not work, but because she has such a power in influencing people that eventually people will believe what she says, and then you just have to nurture this position and keep the subjective belief, and that's what's very, very important. And so when you're a manufacturer, you have to decide where you're going to go, in the objective measure of quality or in the subjective measure of quality. And unfortunately, the subjective measure of quality, which is the consumer evaluation of quality, will give you more return on investment. So you have to be very careful, because you don't want to say, I'm only going to do what the consumer wants. Sometimes, and that's what's more interesting and more difficult, is to anticipate what the consumer wants without the consumer realizing that that's what they want. So you anticipate, and then you create the product in a subjective way, which is more perceived higher quality by consumers. To succeed in business is you have to be customer focused. Who are the customers? Why are these the customers? What do they want? Why do they want? What do they want? What are the characteristics? What are the benefits? How do they measure quality of what they want? And then you try to replicate this in the shape and form of what's expected of the customers. Distribution is the same. Is you try to identify what's the good mix of distribution, which means how many intermediaries do we need? What is the right set of distributors that will be perceived to be where our type of customers would want to go? And that's why there's a very important characteristic of distributors is that they can do good matching in the selection of products that they take and the type of customers that comes to these distributors. Oftentimes, you see there's different matching for the same franchise in different areas. So what do I mean? And one time I was selling through an organization, my spirit, called Bevmo, Beverage and More. At the time, Bevmo had like 95 stores in California, and they were carrying my product. They were not selling my product to the 95 stores, because if they had done this, there would have been stores where that sold 80% of they would be something like 20% of the store sell 80% of my product. So that would be very wasteful, because there would be 20% of the product that will be sold in 80% of the store. So what they want to do is match the store with the customer. So in fact, out of those 95 stores, they started with 7 stores. The 7 stores are the best qualified store for the typical customer that buys my brand. So 7 stores were very located very precisely, because they were connected to a zip code. And so they started doing this in that zip code. And as they became more successful, they started broadening to 10 stores, 15 stores, 20 stores out of the 95. But I could have never sold in 95 stores, because there was some zip codes where my product will be totally unmatching. But they're wrong is they have the data, is to do the matching. There may be even some distributors, some retailers that they won't have even one store that would match, you know, like a 99-cent store. My product would not function in any of the 99-cent store, obviously, right? So that is very important that you understand your network and that you try to match it as much as possible. So conventional marketing channel is the one that you use the wholesaler and the retailer. The vertical marketing system is where you will be using the wholesalers integrated either in the retailers or in the manufacturers, or just one altogether, where the manufacturer will also be wholesaling and will be retailing. There is some issue with this. And one issue, again, that is to understand what other issues there are in choosing the channel of distribution. What other issues you have?
Could it be how many products that are that this wholesaler is selling that is within your same market?
Yeah, so that's true. So it's the the similarity between in the products that they sell is very important. And so, you know, you can go two ways. You can say, who are your customer? Definition of your target, and then you see if their definition of the target is the same as your target. That's usually more complicated. The simplest one is, what products do you sell? So I know if there's certain brands of cognac, if they have it and they do well with it, means that they have this, and those brands, we have the same target, I would probably do well with them. But sometimes it's not the same exact product. I would look at what kind of gin do they sell, what kind of vodka do they sell, what kind of other products do they sell, because that would be defining the type of target that they sell at the same time. So that is very important to see what kind of product they sell. But there's another thing that is very important. It's the margin. The margin is that the more intermediaries you have, the more your product will end up being expensive when offered to the customers. So Califia Farm makes a product for $1, and then they can sell it for something, $1 plus something, to customers. So they say, you know what, let's be crazy, let's make 50%. So Califia Farm sells it direct for $1.50. So now the product is bought by $1.50 and customers expect it to be $1.50. Then they say, hey, why don't we sell more products by selling it to intermediaries who would sell it to their own network of customers? Then those retailers come and say, how much you sell the product? $1. How much customer know the product to be? $1.50. So then they go, okay, I can make 50%. That's a good margin. But then you realize that you can only sell it to 15, 20 retailers, because it's a lot of work for a manufacturer to develop relationship with retailers. It's much less work to develop relationship with wholesalers. So if you sell in California, you have thousands of retailers. So for Califia Farm to work with 1,000 retailers, each one of them works with 10,000 customers. So that's like millions of customers at the end of the day. But you're working through these retailers. You may say, why don't I find a wholesaler for California? So that way we can have 20 wholesalers for the 20 biggest states. And it's easier for us to deal with 20 individual organizations than deal with thousands of those retailers that this is going to take. But if you do this, the wholesaler is going to want their margin, and then you're going to have to split the margin of this 50 cents, this 50%, between the wholesaler and the retailer. In fact, 50 cents is still good, because that's a 50%. So you could do 20 and 30, 25 and 25, but I doubt that the retailers. Normally, the rule of thumb is a wholesaler takes between 20 and 30%, and retailers takes between 25 and 50%. There's always people under, or there's people above, but that's the average. And again, it depends on which product you're selling. So then it becomes more complicated if the product is not made in the USA, because then you have another individual, which is called an importer. So you have manufacturer, importer, wholesaler, and distributor. So there, the 50% are definitely not enough. So when you're selling this product at 150, you essentially killed your product, because the perception is it's worth 150. But now you cannot sell it 150 if you're using a traditional, if it's made overseas, because you need to have, for importer, it's between 15 and 25%. For the wholesaler, again, it's 20 to 30. And for the retailer, it's 20 to 50%. So that's the trick. That's another thing that you have to walk the walk, which is that you have to work with people and see the fact that they need to make money. And as they make money, they support your brand. They don't support your brand because it's a good brand, because it's a quality product. Is they support your brand based on the margin that they make. Big margin, they want to talk to you. Low margin, they don't want to talk to you. Big margin, less likely that you make quality product because you have a big margin to increase the margin, and you increase the margin by either making more products or by making it less good. But as you make more products, it becomes difficult to make it better. As you make it more standardized, you make it more average. As you make it more average, you reduce the price, you can increase the margin, but then the quality of the product is being reduced. And now what you have to do is you have to increase money into the promotion in order to increase the perception, the subjective perception that it's a better product. But it's all in subjective perception of being quality, not the objective perception of being quality, because it costs you more money to make it objective than it costs you to be subjective. But if you make it subjective perception by advertising, by using a huge celebrity, it takes a lot of money at one time. So you have to have that money. So then it's a chicken or the egg. That's why sometimes you need an investor to come and sort of give you a big boost, a big turbo boost in your system by giving you this extra money that you will not invest in the product, but you will invest in sponsoring, in advertising, in using celebrities in order to quickly get this uh, popularity, which the popularity is going to be translated into, if everybody talks about it, it must be good. But if everybody talks about it, it's that it's been well communicated for everybody to talk about it. It's not often that it's talked about it more because experts have defined, they realize that it was so much better. Oftentimes, experts, when they rave about a product, is because they have an incentive to rave about the product. Very few uh, magazines will give free editorial, non-compensated editorial, raving about a product just for the sake of information. Most of the time, the media promotes most of the time. Let me give you a number. 99.9% of the time, the media promotes brands not based on existing real quality of a product, but because they have an incentive, they have an interest in promoting this product because they get some kind of compensation in order to do this, short term or long term compensation for promoting these products, some support. And as they support, this brand becomes more popular. As these brands become more popular, it's perceived as being more quality, but it's a fake quality. It's this herd effect. And then people eventually, through this concept of herd effect, start consuming the product until there's a smarter brand that gives more incentive to for the media to support them. And so it's constantly the interest that keeps shifting and popularity of the product that keeps shifting almost like a trend, but it's rarely because of an inherent quality of the product. It's made up, it's controlled. Okay, what are the needs of the consumers? What are the objectives? What are the three main strategies? And then you eventually evaluate the result of all of that. So the logistic function is to order, store, look at stocking and inventory, find the best transportation methods, and eventually analyze the stocks. The idea of logistics is to control which method is the best in terms of time and cost per shipping. There's the concept of inbound and outbound. So what you receive in the company is inbound, what you expedite is outbound. So the marketing logistics is not just about shipping, it's also about getting supplies. And so the concept of supply chain and total quality management and the value chain is you make quality not just of the production of the product, but you make quality from the supply, from the processing and the production, and from the also the shipping. So shipping, just-in-time inventory, just-in-time delivery are also methods of creating just noticeable difference for a company. The main ways to ship are the rail, the truck, the water, the pipeline, and the air. And all of these have major impact because they have different terms based on speed, based on how much do they meet schedules, based on the type of products that they can move around and the area that they cover, the type of cost per weight, and then the flexibility is if they can be scheduled at the last minute, if they have to be uh, exactly organized versus um, like I said, planned ahead of time because there's difficulties of because of the seasons, because there's rushes. There's area times where there's more shipping than others for specific products, and so there's things that you have to plan ahead a year in advance. Some things that you have to plan in much shorter time. So all of this have to be taken into consideration.